Hello and welcome to the build video for the Tenor drone for the 3D printed small pipes. As you can see, I've got the parts here. I've got what I'm calling my wood parts here, which are the parts that would normally be made of wood in a traditional small pipe. And I've got the parts that would normally be made these days either from boxwood or imitation ivory, and at times in the past were made out of ivory, or longer ago were made out of horn and substances like that. So as you can see, the parts have already been cleaned. They were printed with a brim. So whatever method you prefer to use to remove the brim, I usually use a not too sharp craft knife or Stanley knife, because I find a sharp knife tends to dig into the actual piece, whereas a blunt blade, and I always keep a few blunt blades around, a blunt blade will tend to peel the brim away without damaging the piece and leave a nice rounded edge. If there's any flash left on the piece, obviously just sand the edge with a fine grit sandpaper. This is a 600 here, so I'm not using anything too coarse with these pieces because it will leave marks. So you can take the edge off with a fine grit sandpaper, and that should leave you with what I've got here. For the ivory parts, I don't use a brim. They're small and I don't think there's any need for a brim. It depends on if you're printing them in ABS or if you're printing them in PLA. Here I'm printing in PLA, as you know. I've given you the settings earlier in the video. These parts won't then need very much cleaning, just the occasional speck or fleck that might have gone astray might need taken off of them, but for the most part they should come off the glass pretty much ready to use. For the wood parts, once you've cleaned them, start by testing the fit. You've got two pairs of parts here. You've got the tuning pin and you've got the bottom joint. That's a pair, okay? And you've got the barrel, the tuning chamber, and you've got the top joint. Okay, that's a pair as well. So let's try them together. The top of the tuning pin has got combing on it. You'll see what that's for later. And you'll notice that the end is a slight bell. That's a nice feature. It's not actually traditional, but that's a nice little feature for these pipes, just to try to smooth the sound out a bit. This tenon fits into the wider hole on the bottom of the tuning pin. They should go together fairly easily. If they don't force them. Instead, get some of your sandpaper, and you can take a slightly coarser grit here. This is about a 200 grit, because this part isn't going to be seen. And just turn it, and you can get quite vigorous with it if you need to get rid of the excess plastic. It just depends on whether your printer, what sort of rate your printer's extruding at. This piece is a fairly good fit. The extrusion is just about right. You might find it's a loose fit. If it's a loose fit, you're probably going to need to use a little bit of glue. Super glue should be perfectly good for that. So we've got a good fit with this piece here. I'm going to take it to pieces again to make it easier to put the ivories on. With the tuning chamber, you'll see that there's a little button on top. This fits into the wider end. See how both ends are flared on this piece? One's wider, the other end's slightly narrower and is squared off. You want the wide flared end, and you're going to try and fit that over the button. Again, don't force it if it's going to be difficult. Smooth it off with a bit of sandpaper. It's worth working on it for a while, because particularly if you've waited as long as I have printing at 0.06 of a millimeter layers, you're going to want to treat these pieces with a little care. So smooth it off and it should just snap on. Okay? I'll take that off again for now. Now back to our first pair. The bottom joint has got one ivory part. You'll see that you've got this projecting mount, this end bush, these two ferrules, and you've also got these two projecting mounts here. Okay, you want to take a close look at those so you recognise them. They're slightly different. It's this one here that you want. This one slides on, and again, make sure it's a reasonably snug but easy fit, and if not, take time, sand it, and that's the finished bottom joint. You might want to add a couple of dots of glue to make sure that that stays in place when you're playing it. For the tuning pin, again, make sure that the combing is to the top. We're going to use that in a wee minute. And you want to put the other projecting mount onto the bottom of the tuning pin and push the pin carefully, and it should just slip or snap into place. As before, if it is difficult at all, sand the inside of the projecting mount. Maybe wrap a bit of sandpaper around a pencil and go around the inside of it as evenly as possible. If you sand the pin, you'll tend to get scores out onto the visible part of the pin, which you're going to see a lot when you're using the pipes. So I would sand the mount rather than the pin in that case. And as we did before, just join the bottom joint to the tuning pin. That is the whole bottom joint of the drone finished. And like I say, you might want to glue it. For the top section, we've got the tuning chamber first. There are two ferrules for either end of the tuning chamber. These are the ferrules here. They're identical, interchangeable actually. You'll notice that there are two fine lines. If you've printed at a fine enough resolution, you'll see these fairly clearly. The fine lines show you which way to orient the ferrule. You should put the fine lines furthest from the outside edge, and the wide, smooth section should go to the edge. Just like that. And again, the fit should be snug but not tight, not impossible. And in the case of the top ferrule, it's the opposite way around. So the two fine lines are towards the inside of the piece, and the wide band, the smooth band, is towards the outside. Add a little dot of glue carefully. You don't need much, just to stop it moving, and you're done. The top joint also has two ivory parts. The first is the bush. This is a very important part musically. Most of the other ivory parts are really just decoration. The hole in the middle of this bush should be no less than 4mm. I've reamed mine out to 4.5 with a drill bit. You want to be careful when doing that, obviously. This should simply pop in to the centre of the top joint. You can see it's slightly squint, so if you turn it over, squeeze on the table, should be fine. Good. Okay, the last ivory part is the projecting mount from the end of the drone. Rather than a ring cap, this is a very traditional style of small pipe drone, and it's got quite a ostentatious flared projecting mount at the top. Quite a good look. That should just pop on. Done. And you should get that nice circles within circles design on the top of the drone. So, to complete the top section, again, you remember the button, it should just press into place. And glue won't hurt there. If there's any problem with the fit, if it's slightly tight, you might well see it want to sit like that. Again, it's worth the time and effort to go around the button. You want it straight-sided. If you use a lot of sandpaper on it, it'll start to get curved. So, being very careful, I would usually just gently run a knife round the inside edge to try and flatten it. That's a matter of just patience and so on. But it's worth getting it right because the quality of sound you get will be affected by the time that you take on the piece. So, there you go. Top and bottom of your Tenor drone. All that remains for now is to hemp the tuning pin and to put a reed in it. The drone tenon will also be hemped ultimately in order to put it into the drone stock, but at this stage, until we've got a drone stock to try it in, there's really no point in hemping that tenon there. So we're only going to hemp the end of the tuning pin. For those who haven't hemped a drone before, you need yellow hemp. You can get that online from any bagpipe supplier. There are other places you can get it too, probably cheaper. Beeswax you can also get from bagpipe suppliers. I actually just get it from hardware shop because it's cheaper. The beeswax should be rubbed onto the first maybe a couple of feet of hemp at most. A couple of strokes just to help the hemp to grip. Now, if you want to look closely at the combing is what's going to grip the hemp thread, and it's very important that it grips it and that it doesn't turn on the mount. So, lay down the first layer of waxed hemp carefully. Use the grooves. You can see how I caught the start of the hemp underneath the wrapping and laying it down fairly tight. This is where you need to make sure you've got good hemp, and if your roll of hemp starts to get old, if it's lying around in your workshop for a while, then you might find that it snaps. So you need good fresh hemp to take the pressure so that it won't turn. And we'll go over it one more time and then I'm going to try it in the drone. We've got 3 layers so far. We might need a wee bit more than that to get a good fit, because there's a little bit of clearance in the sizes, and it depends again on how your printer is, what the extrusion is like. Going to need more than that. If you found the other parts a tight fit, you'll probably find this a tight fit too. However, that might bring its own problems, so I'll explain that in a little minute. Okay, you can see that that's sliding more easily now. So I'll put one more partial layer of hemp on. I'm happy with that. That's good and nice snug fit. Okay, now to make the hemp off, I'm just going to cut it there. And then I'm going to, you can watch closely, I'm going to tie it round itself, round the back of the tuning pin, through the loop. I'm going to pull it tight. Now I should be able just to snap the end off. That should stop it from fraying and coming off. There. Now, your tuning pin should go on easily and move relatively easily. You'll often find, because of what's called elephant's foot in printing, that an unfinished drone tuning chamber, and I've done quite a few of these now, will be stiff to go on over the hemp, and then too easy when it's sliding. There's a good reason for this. I'm going to explain that fully because it's very important. Because this bottom part of the drone is on the hot build plate, it sometimes sags down a little bit during printing. Very, very small amount. We're talking fractions of a millimetre, but it's enough to make a difference to the performance of the tuning slide. The only way to solve it, apart from adjustments that I've already made in the drawing, which should sort the problem completely for some of you. So the only thing to do about this is, again, to use a little bit of sandpaper and a little bit of TLC. It's actually a very good idea to give the inside of the tuning chamber a rub with very fine grit sandpaper, even if you're not having this problem. Just take away the print lines and help it to move freely. So I'm making a tube out of 600 grit sandpaper. I've already done this, but a little bit more won't hurt. The smoother it is, the more freely it will slide. And what we're trying to get rid of, which might take a little bit of time, a little bit of perseverance, is the elephant's foot, the slight constriction at the build plate end of the piece. Absolutely must get rid of that. And as I said, I've made adjustments to the drawing which help to get rid of it, but it's a tricky thing, and often there'll be a certain amount of it there. Okay. So keep sanding and trying the parts together. And when you've got it to the stage where it will move freely and not, still a wee bit tight there. Yeah, well, I'll work on that. But basically you want to try and get rid of that as much as possible so that it has the same action throughout its range. If it grips a wee bit there, that's no bad thing if it's just on the very edge, because you don't really want it to fall off. And its range should run from the point where the yellow hemp disappears through to around about there. That's the working movement range of the drone slide, and most of its life it will just sit there. Okay, so the last thing that we've got to do to check that our build's been a success, and this is really the moment of truth. If you've glued any parts, I should have said you're going to want to have made sure, if you're gluing the black parts, the wood parts, that you apply an even circle of glue all the way around the inside edge of the joint, because you don't want to leave any opportunity for air leaks. When you're gluing the mounts, you can just use a carefully placed dot so as not to squeeze glue out and make a mess. You don't need to make these mounts airtight, but you do need, for these joints, to be airtight. So make sure the glue goes all the way around. Just a thin bead around about the middle of that tenon will do fine. Squeeze it into place, and now for the moment of truth. Here I've got a set of 3 pipe dreams, small pipe reeds. These reeds have been matched to the Montgomery small pipes which I've been printing, which are similar but not identical to these. I'm going to take these drones in 2 pipe dreams, so by the time that you're looking for a set, there should be, if you wish, a custom set of drone reeds available for these pipes. There are also numerous pipe makers you can go to if you would like to try cane drone reeds, which are the more traditional style, but these synthetic drone reeds are very reliable. So the drone reed's got a tenon with a rubberized type coating on it, and it's sized exactly to fit your drone socket is sized exactly to fit it. Again, it depends on how your individual printer is performing exactly, but if it's right on the target, then that should just push into place. Now, you'll hear a higher pitch as the drone blows itself in, and then you'll hear it lock in. It's playing a sweet E flat, as you can hear, and the tuning slide on this drone will also allow you still sounding pretty good on F. So there you go. That's the drone.